So hello and welcome back to Books and Things. Today is the first day of a very exciting 2 weeks of Charles Dickens. I am so excited. As you know, Charles Dickens is my favourite author and this is very exciting. So today I'm going to be telling you about my least favourite Dickens novel, which is, as it happens, Oliver Twist. Chapter 1 treats of the place where Oliver Twist was born and of the circumstances attending his birth. Among other public buildings in a certain town, which for many reasons it will be prudent to refrain from mentioning, and to which I will assign no fictitious name, there is one anciently common to most towns, great or small, to wit, a workhouse. And in this workhouse was born, on a day and date which I need not trouble myself to repeat, inasmuch as it can be of no possible consequence to the reader in this stage of the business at all events, the item of mortality whose name is prefixed to the head of this chapter. Man, sometimes I forget how dense Dickens is. Now I feel like this may surprise some people because I know Oliver Twist is much beloved and is one of Dickens's most famous novels, but for me it's just not his best. It is my least favourite. As you all know, I love Charles Dickens so much. I mean look, I have a picture of him on my wall, of course I love him so much, but Oliver Twist is his only novel that I would probably go so far as to say I don't love. I do like it, but I don't love it. I should also say, before I go into more depth about what I do like about it and what I don't, I haven't read it for quite a while. I've only read Oliver Twist once, and that was when I was about 15 or 16, so it has been a while. I am hoping to do a reread of it later this year, hopefully do a buddy read of it with Carolyn from BBC Girl. I'll link her channel down below. So like many people, I went into Oliver Twist thinking I knew what it was about, and then very soon realised that I didn't. Oliver Twist, maybe more than any Dickens novel, has kind of seeped into popular culture, but the version of Oliver Twist that has seeped into popular culture is not the novel really at all. It takes some elements and the subplot of the novel and makes it into a whole new plot, which I think did have quite an impact on the way I read Oliver Twist. Now Oliver Twist, as you may know, is about a boy called Oliver Twist. He is given this name by the Beadle. He is born into poverty, his mother dies in childbirth, and he is brought up by a workhouse because there is nowhere else for him to go. He is not very popular with the Beadle and the other staff of the workhouse, as you may be familiar with the very famous, infamous in fact, scene where Oliver Twist asks for more gruel at dinner because he, like all the boys, are pretty starving. After this, the workhouse tried to quickly apprentice him away. He's apprenticed away to an undertaker's, but he doesn't get on very well there either. Oliver Twist runs away to London, where he famously meets a pickpocket and slight scoundrel called Jack Dawson, also known as the Artful Dodger. The Artful Dodger takes Oliver Twist to a man named Fagin, who has a couple of boys working with him, not very many, it should be stressed. When Oliver Twist first meets Fagin, there are, I think, 4 or 5 boys, it says, in the room with them, and really the only boys of significance are the Artful Dodger, Oliver Twist himself, and a boy called Charlie Bates. This kind of army of children working for Fagin has kind of been invented. But anyway, up to now this probably sounds like the story you know, and this follows quite closely like things like Oliver the Musical and quite a lot of adaptations, but the majority of the novel actually isn't spent in the company of Bill Sikes and Fagin. The majority of the novel focuses on Oliver's experience with 2 different families that adopt him at various points over the course of the novel. One includes a young woman called Rose and one includes Mr. Brownlow, and the plot that is really at the heart of the book is about this man, Mr. Monks, who seems to be trying to get Oliver Twist killed somehow. So let's talk about what I do like about Oliver Twist, because of course it's Dickens, there are things that I love. As always, I love Charles Dickens' writing style. I find it so rich and engaging, so different and odd. There are also some brilliant scenes and moments in Oliver Twist. There is a reason why Please Sir, I Want Some More has become so famous. It is because it is a brilliant scene. Some of Dickens' social critique, especially his writing about the workhouse, is so funny but so heart-wrenching at the same time. It is absolutely brilliant and very, very well done. I especially think the characters surrounding the workhouse, like the Beadle, are just done very well. Another thing I adore about Oliver Twist is Nancy. Nancy is one of the only female characters in the first half of Dickens' work who is really, I think, interesting. I mean, she's not fully developed. She could be developed more, but she is a very interesting character. For me, one of the best scenes in the whole of the novel is when Nancy meets Rosie Maylie and Mr. Brownlow and kind of tells them about her life, and it's just brilliant. In popular culture, Nancy is often considered a prostitute. I think it's actually much more complicated than that. It's never explicitly said that she is a prostitute, and in the foreword to a later edition of Oliver Twist, Dickens refers to Nancy as a prostitute, but it's really, really important to remember that in the Victorian period, the word prostitute prostitute didn't mean what we consider prostitutes to be today. It was often just a go-to term for all fallen women. So if a woman had slept with someone she wasn't married to, she was considered a prostitute. That didn't mean she was selling sex. I don't think actually in Oliver Twist that Nancy is supposed to be selling herself. I don't think that's there. I mean, you can read it into that, but I think actually she's just someone that's living with Bill Sikes outside of marriage. For me, Nancy is a really interesting character, and you can see in Nancy the seeds for a more interesting exploration in Dickens's later novels about the idea of a fallen woman. I also think Bill Sikes is a very interesting character. Often in kind of popular culture today, it tends to be that Fagin is presented as less evil than Bill Sikes, and Bill Sikes is the really evil one, and Fagin is just a bit misguided. In the book, Fagin's evilness is very bound up with his Jewishness in a way that is really not very nice at all. So I understand why a lot of interpretations choose to depict Fagin as a lot less evil than Bill Sikes. Actually, in the book, Fagin is completely evil and Bill Sikes is the one that is more complicated. He's not a nice man, but he's a very interesting man, and I think his characterisation and his kind of torment and difficulty, especially with later on events in the novel, is actually done really well. But anyway, moving on to stuff I like less about the novel. As I was just talking about, the presentation of Fagin is not very nice and just inescapable. Dickens isn't always the loveliest writer to read. That is true with so many Victorian novels. The presentation of women, the presentation of disabled people, and the presentation of Jewish people in a lot of Victorian literature is quite dubious. And in Oliver Twist, Fagin is evil and he is Jewish, and these things for Dickens are sort of one and the same. It's not very nice. Halfway through the writing of Oliver Twist, someone wrote in a letter of complaint pointing this out, and Dickens really changed his attitude. The second half of Oliver Twist, when it was first printed, it has a lot less references to the fact that Fagin is Jewish, and there is a Jewish character in Our Mutual Friend, Dickens's last book, which I think you can really read as an apology for Fagin. I think that's what Mr. Riot is. But anyway, I'll be talking about Our Mutual Friend much more later. Another thing I don't like as much about Oliver Twist is the plot. For me, Oliver Twist doesn't really hang together as well as some of Dickens's other novels. There is probably a reason why it is the subplot of Oliver Twist and not the central plot of Oliver Twist that has been remembered in popular culture. Mr. Monks is a fairly interesting villain, but he's not as interesting or as gripping as Bill Sikes and Fagin are, and Rose and Mr. Brownlow and their kind of plots are just not that engaging. I like them, I do, but when I think back to reading Oliver Twist, what I most remember about it is Nancy. Often I do find Dickens's minor characters more interesting than his central ones, but I think this is especially so in Oliver Twist. Mr. Brownlow doesn't have that much personality apart from general kindness, and Rose Maylie is one of those typical early Dickensian heroines who just has no personality and no substance beyond this kind of angelicness. I still love Dickens, by the way. Because I love Dickens so much, I am much more critical of Dickens than I think I am sometimes of any other author. I think the main thing, however, for me about Oliver Twist, why I don't like it as much as all the rest of Dickens's novels, is just the character of Oliver Twist. He just doesn't have that much personality, and for me, Oliver Twist doesn't read like a child. And this for me is really significant because I know in Dickens's later works he can do children brilliantly. You know, when you read David Copperfield or Great Expectations or Dombey and Son, the children feel like children and you believe that they are children. Oliver Twist doesn't feel like a child. He's just a man who cries all the time. And I know that Oliver Twist kind of isn't supposed to have a personality. He's supposed to be an every man or an every boy, as you will. But for me, I find it kind of grating and I just don't find him very interesting as a character. In Oliver Twist, as in some of Dickens's early novels, it is what happens to Oliver Twist that is interesting. It is the people he meets and the things he experiences, not him. And I think that's a shame because Dickens does character so well, especially in his later novels, and for me Oliver Twist just doesn't quite live up to that. Before I go, I just want to mention one particular adaptation of Oliver Twist. There are many out there, most of them are not very accurate, and they normally bring Bill Sikes, Fagin, Nancy and the Artful Dodger to the foreground much more than all the rest of the characters. My favourite Oliver Twist adaptation is probably this TV series from 2008, which I really enjoy. In this one, like many others, it combines Rose Maylie and Mr. Brownlow into one family. What I do like about it is that it does have Mr. Monks in, which is very good, because everyone always cuts out Mr. Monks, and he is actually the main bad guy. He's more the main villain than Bill Sikes and Fagin are. I also think Tom Hardy as Bill Sikes is perfect. So basically, as you may have gathered, Oliver Twist is not my favourite Dickens novel at all. There are still many things I love about it, and I am due for a reread. It has been a while, but it is not my favourite favourite, it is not the best. I also wouldn't recommend starting with it. One, because I don't think it's as good or as kind of polished and solidly put together as some of his other books, but also because I think there is a danger in reading something where you think you know the story and you really don't, because like me, I think you will be more liable to end up a bit disappointed. From tomorrow there will be somewhat more enthusiasm, probably. I will see you tomorrow, where I'll be talking about the next Dickens novel on the list. Sorry, Dickens. Sorry, Dickens. I'm sorry.